Steve, we appreciate you giving us the time here on a Friday, as I know you're campaigning all over the state. What is the latest on the rebuild in L.A.? And I believe the answer is virtually nothing. But how much are you hearing from people that are just fed up over the inability of people to rebuild the homes that they lost in the wildfires coming up on nearly a year ago now?
So I laughed because it's laughable, Clay. It's just unbelievable. Apologies for the noise. I'm on the road. I don't know if you can hear. We're in the middle of a very major storm, pouring with rain. Rain, of course, which Gavin Newsom and the idiots in charge are going to let run out into the ocean instead of storing it and getting it to our great ag industry. I'm in the Central Valley of the farmland all around me. It's not going to get this water because they're going to send it out to the ocean to protect the Delta smelt. That's another story. On the Palisades, it's laughable. They haven't done anything. All the time, I'm there hearing from people who are so incredibly frustrated. They get just sent from one ridiculous bit of bureaucracy to the next. They go to the building department. It's a different person each time. They say, we can't give you a permit until you get your insurance. You go to the insurance. They say, we can't give insurance until you get a permit. I mean, it's just round and round. This is all months after Karen Bass ludicrously made an announcement saying, I have just signed an executive order streamlining permitting to help rebuild LA. Nothing's happened, and here's the reason why. When you actually look behind that, I actually watched the video of the press conference where she made that announcement. Here are the words she actually spoke. I have just signed an executive order tasking agency heads with developing paths forward to streamlining permitting. There, in a nutshell, you have the explanation as to why nothing works in California. You've got these ridiculous machine politicians who have no clue how anything works, never done a real job in their lives, no understanding of how to make change happen, totally ideologically driven, not practical, and that's why we're in such a mess. That's why, last bit of news for you today, just seen a poll just come out showing me in the lead in the governor's race, ahead of all the candidates, including all the Democrats. People are sick of this nonsense in California, and it's time for change. We're going to get that change next year.
Well, that was the next place I wanted to go with you, Steve, which is you have to think that at some point the people have suffered enough, regardless of where they're ideologically aligned. At some point, you just want stuff to work. At some point, you just want to be safe. You're sick of waiting in lines that never get anything done anyway. And I was wondering if you could speak to what we saw in San Francisco recently. It came to our attention that the mayor of San Francisco now isn't some Republican, not a MAGA guy, but isn't completely certifiably insane and was willing to take a more reasonable approach toward Trump's offer of trying to assist in the cleanup. So do you view that as indicative of what's going on more statewide, where people are seeing the craziness for what it is? Is that more specific to San Francisco? I wanted your take on what's going on up there.
Yeah. No, it's really interesting. I mean, that the mayor you're speaking about, Daniel Lurie, he's a friend of mine. I've known him for years. He's a Democrat, but he's a non-crazy Democrat. Let's use that term. And he's definitely the kind of person that he's focusing on practical things. He's not an ideologue. There's another mayor, less well known, in San Jose, just the other end of the San Francisco Bay, Matt Mahan, who's also got that more pragmatic approach. So you've now got the Bay Area with two major mayors who are in that category, and it does show that people are waking up. Now, the Bay Area, obviously very heavily Democratic, and so it's not surprising that you're going to have Democrats in elected there. A Republican really wouldn't be able to make it work in the Bay Area, I think. However, statewide, I think that exact same mood, that I'd say desperation for change, is what will help me win next year as governor as a Republican. Because across the state, it's a much more Republican state, actually, than people think. The base Republican vote in California has been pretty steady for the last 20 years or so. It's just over 40%. So that's a gap that is big, but it's not unbridgeable. And the scale of their failure, every single measure you look at, we are the worst performing state in America. highest unemployment rate, highest poverty rate, highest cost of insurance, rent, home prices, the worst business climate in America 10 years in a row, according to Chief Executive Magazine. U.S. News and World Report rankings, 50th out of 50 for affordability, 50th out of 50 for opportunity, the worst reading scores in the country. I mean, it just goes on and on. They failed on every front, and people are really sick of it. The difference this time is they're going to have a really strong, clear, common sense, positive alternative that I'm laying out there. $3 gas, your electric bills cut in half, a home you can afford to buy, your first $100,000 of income free of state income tax. It's going to be a real shock to them, I think, to face a candidate like me who's got the business experience, the government reform experience, the media platform, to take them on, and I'm going to take them apart, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Isn't it interesting, Steve? That was all really well laid out. There are lots of states that have Democrats and Republicans involved that can be successful. There are tons of red states that basically have just said, hey, Democrats, thanks, but no thanks. Maybe they still have power in some way a little bit, like in Nashville area where I live, which is deep red state, but Nashville's a little bit blue. But anything that Democrats completely control, that is where there is no alternative party, you have abject failure. Do you get the sense, like, it doesn't mean that Californians have to believe that Republicans have all the answers, but just to say, hey, maybe a monolithic commitment to Democrats is not getting us the best possible result. Are you picking up on that when you're traveling around the state and making your arguments?
100%. I was just about to say exactly that, Clay, which is that, and I get real, when we do our town halls and have meetings, real nodding along when I make the point that, look, we've now had 15 years of one-party rule. They've controlled every statewide office, supermajority in the legislature, all the big cities and the big counties. Next year, it'll be 16 years of one-party rule. And I say, look, you don't have to become a Republican. Let's just agree it's not healthy to have one-party rule for so long. It never works anywhere. So let's just have a bit of balance. Even when I'm elected governor as a Republican, frankly, looking at, we're going to fight for every Republican candidate, and I'm actively on the road supporting other Republicans at every level because we got to elect more Republicans. But it looks like they'll still have certainly a majority, probably still a supermajority in the legislature. So it's just a bit of balance that we're looking for. That argument, I think, goes over very well. I've seen it on people's faces, and it's part of the story.
I don't know, Steve, if you sat through the pretty positive spin, but the Schwarzenegger Netflix bio movie that they made maybe it was a year or two ago. Anyway, I bring it up because you have seen it. I bring it up because one thing that the governor, as we all call him, who was at least theoretically a Republican, something that he said is once he got into office that it was impossible to do anything because the machinery of the state, the government bodies, regulatory agencies, public sector unions statewide are so powerful and so entrenched that you can't really do anything. What do you say to that? How could you break? I'm sure there's some truth to that, but how do you break through that if you're given a mandate by the people of California as governor?
Well, the difference is, and Arnold's a good friend of mine, I've known him for 20 years, the difference is that I will go into this with government reform experience. So I was senior advisor to the Prime Minister in the UK, my office right next to the cabinet room there. I'm not saying it's a direct read across, of course not, but it's a similar sized economy and government bureaucracy. And neither am I saying that what we did there, remember I wasn't the decision maker, I was senior advisor, was some perfect success. Far from it. But I learned how the system works. I learned how bureaucrats work and how incredibly aggressive you need to be in order to make change happen. The other lesson, you compare President Trump this time around to the first time around. The years that were spent in running up to 2024, getting ready, having the executive orders drafted, the personnel decisions made, the legal arguments clarified and ready to go. I'm doing that work right now. on a whole range of issues. Look, we don't have a massive team or resources like President Trump had in between 2020 and 24, but that work is vital. I'll give you a really specific example, one that is very close to your hearts. For example, the issue of biological boys and girls sports. So I went to the track and field championships in Clovis, actually here in the Central Valley, back in the summer when that scandal popped up again. And I didn't just want to complain about it. I wanted to lay out what I would do about it. And so one of the people on my team is Governor Pete Wilson's top legal advisor. And he and I said to him, look, how are we going to deal with this? That scandal of biological boys in girls' sports and locker rooms all goes back to a law that was passed in 2013, AB 1266. Now, we did the work on that, and it turns out that the governor has the power to initiate a process to overturn legislation that violates the California state constitution. We think that law violates the Constitution in two specific places, Section 28, Section 31. I won't go into the details, but it's a good example of how if you're properly prepared and ready for battle with the right attitude, I think you really can do a lot. The governor's role is much more powerful than people think. You appoint thousands of people to hundreds of state agencies, and you can direct their work. That's how I'm going to open up the oil industry so we get $3 gas. That's how I'm going to end the scandal of these extortionate lawsuits that are crippling every small business. There's a whole range of things where actually by appointing the right people, kicking out the ideologues and the kind of bureaucrats and putting common sense people into these agencies, you can make change happen pretty quickly.
Can I just real quick on the lawsuits? I know about this from friends, Steve, who just sell products nationwide that even if you're selling something as straightforward as like food, that California, there are these troll law firms and all they do is bring suits for the most, if you don't have that there's some like carcinogen that theoretically exists in the, the beets that you're selling, they'll sue you in California.
Yeah. Exactly. And by the way, why? It's another example of the corrupt, rotten system in California, because trial lawyers, if you look at the donations to Democrat politicians, specifically Gavin Newsom, by category, the number one donor to Gavin Newsom over his years in office in California, government unions. Number two, trial lawyers.
Not surprising.
And the same with the legislature. So they create all this legislation that creates the opportunity for litigation. So that's another thing you've got to fight and be ready for, because it's crippling businesses of all sizes and in all sectors. And as someone who's run a business, I used to run restaurants. It's a nightmare business at the best of times. In California, it's the absolute worst because of these people and what they're doing. But we really can change this. I mean, for example, there's something called the Private Attorney General Act, which was passed in 2004 in California. Sounds obscure, but if you're in a restaurant or a bar or a farm or anything, you're being hit by these extortionate lawsuits all the time. And you have to settle, and it costs you hundreds of thousands of dollars, sometimes millions of dollars a year. It's basically a cost of doing business. I've got a plan to end that pretty much overnight by actually understanding how that law is supposed to work, appointing a labor commissioner who's going to be on the side of business, who can make the whole thing go away without any recourse to the legislature. So there's actually a lot of things you can get done if you really know what you're doing and you're properly prepared.
Steve, quick on the way out here. Have you seen any impact on the California governor's race based on Mamdani winning in New York City? Did it sort of rustle the Democrats out there to think, wait, maybe we're going farther left wing than I thought? I know there's a lot of cross pollination between New York City and L.A. in particular, San Francisco too. Any reaction that you've seen in California from that win?
Well, I don't know what category to put this in, Clay, but the latest news on the governor's race is our friend Eric Swalwell is about to jump in the race, we hear, next week. So I don't know whether he's sensing. I don't know whether he's sensing an opportunity here. I can't decide who I'd rather face: Swalwell with the endless opportunity for fang jokes, or Katie Porter with the endless opportunity for mashed potato jokes. It's a tough choice, that one.
There we go. All right, Steve. When do we see you on the debate stage? When does this thing heat up in California? You're going to be next summer. When does it actually happen? When does it come together?
The primary is in June. The filing deadline is March, so I would imagine that between March is probably the kickoff when we know exactly who all the candidates are going to be. We
look forward to you laying it straight for fang and mashed potatoes and all the rest. Thank you so much, Steve. Great to have you on.
Fantastic. Great to be with you.
I want you guys to put the name Preborn at the very top of your list for worthy nonprofit organizations that this holiday season could really use your support. They have two goals. The first is to save unborn babies from the terrible tragedy of abortion, and the second is to help the pregnant women carrying those unborn babies. And this all comes down to saving the lives of unborn children every day. Because when a mom-to-be walks into a preborn clinic, she's welcomed with open arms, love, and support. And she's introduced to her baby through an ultrasound. And for the first time, she sees life, not loss, and is offered hope-filled choices. When she chooses life, Preborn continues walking with her for up to 2 years, providing maternity clothes, diapers, counseling, and so much more. As you think about your year-end giving, consider the greatest investment you could ever make, the gift of life. As the year closes out, your tax-deductible donation can be the difference between life and death for a tiny baby right now. Using your cell phone, dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby. That's pound 250, say baby, or visit preborn.com/buck. All gifts are tax-deductible. Preborn is a 5-star rated charity. Go to preborn.com/buck, sponsored by Preborn.